system has pushed forward passing exams over and above everything else. And this is one of the major challenges that Tuteria is trying to crack today. China has almost phased out fossil fuel cars completely. And that's because every secondary school student's project is to build an EV prototype. And by the way, if you put that Nigerian JS3 child in those systems, they probably will do better. Right? Because we're not bereft, we're not short of the human capacity.
Yes.
What we have is a systemic problem.
Hello, parents and students. My name is Esther Adewumi, and I'm here today with Joshua, the GM at Tuteria. Welcome, Joshua.
Hi.
Today we'll be having conversations about the education system in the country, which I think it's a very, very, very important subject to talk about. All right, Josh. My first question is, when we say Nigeria is behind in terms of the education system, what are we measuring this by? Is it the outcome, the curriculum, or the system itself?
I think it's a combination of everything, right? Outcome being the number one thing. Right, because you really want to define upfront what should the result of your educational system be. Now, if you, in trying to do that, you then need to now step back a little bit and say, okay, the system itself, which is a function of the curriculum in the system, and curriculum in this case is what you have in the system. Do you understand? And again, from our own standpoint as Tuteria, we talk about pedagogy, for example, which is how, teaching is delivered. So from the pedagogical aspect of what we're teaching, right, to the actual content that actually makes up the curriculum, right? What you find and what you see is that a lot of these things needs to be fixed, reinvented, to reflect what is obtainable in the 21st century. So I'll just take it one by one again. So first thing is you need to define the outcome. Do we want this education system to produce the next set of machine learning experts, right? Or do we also want the system to produce the next very brilliant doctors, engineers? And of course, when you're doing that, you also need to now use the benchmark. You need to benchmark what are the best doctors doing today? What tools are they using? So then you can walk back to the problem to say, if you have that, and we can see that this is what the best engineers are doing today. This is what the best doctors are doing today. These are the kind of tools that they're using. You now walk back from that situation to say, okay, what do we have? And of course, it naturally throws up the situation, and you realize that both in terms of our curriculum, right, which is mirrored across the entire system, you can see the very obvious gap. So I would say being clear on what outcome we're looking out for, right, in our education system, and it's been done. For example, in China, for over the last 30 years, they were clear as to what they wanted to achieve from the education system.
Wow.
And that basically was what fed into what they taught, both in terms of academical knowledge and skills. The other day, I had the chance to be speaking to somebody who was just coming back from China, and the person is very close to me, and she was telling me that, unknown to the entire world, China has almost phased out fossil fuel cars completely. And that's because every secondary school student's project is to build an EV prototype. So you can see the intentionality that it's from an outcome base. We want everybody to be able to build certain things. And that is basically what fed into their system. So flowing from your question, the first thing is the outcome. We need to be clear as to what kind of outcome should we be seeing. That will naturally then dictate what goes into the curriculum, which by extension will then impact on the entire education system from basic, right, to secondary, that is senior secondary, to tertiary and beyond. Awesome. Right. So that's my take on that.
Okay, my next question, Josh, is if we compare a JSS3 student or SS1 student here in the country to their peers in the US, UK, or Canada, where do we see the biggest gaps?
So going from what I mentioned earlier on, because in those systems, they tried to a significant extent, and I think anytime we're talking about anything now in the world, we cannot leave out China.
Of course.
Right, because again, they've shown the rest of the world the possibility that exists when people become very intentional. And that intentionality also is mirrored in how they've, designed their education system. So if you look at those other countries as well, US, Canada, UK, right, there's an undue advantage that they already have, right, simply because of the fact that for the most part, maybe not all, right, you still have some, institutions in those places that are very academic based, right, and I think it's also good to mention that, there are different types of, endeavors that goes into academic institutions. Some institutions are purely for research, right? 100%, you understand? And so, but if you bring it down to the junior cadre, which is where GS3 falls into, right? You have your K1 to K9, right? Like we call them in Tuteria, right? What you find is that the distinction and the difference in the academic, knowledge, the scope of their academic work, is not much different, right? Even though you have it in maybe American standard, British standard, but what your guys are studying for in their common entrance level here, right, is very similar to what they're studying for in many of these places. But the only difference is that by the time you're at a level of JS3, right, you already, because of the tools and because of how robust their entire systems are. Keep in mind again that it's informed by where they want to be. What you have is that guy in GS3 or its equivalent in somewhere like the US or Canada, UK or China, right, would have clarity regarding the end goal. And again, everything is the outcome that is fueling everything. You remember, when you were growing up, or when we were growing up, we used to have that question of what would you like to be when you grew up?
Of course. It's a normal
and,
question.
Traditionally, you would find that most kids in those climes at a very early age, because of the kind of things that their systems exposes them to, as early as maybe your GS3, there's clarity. Right? So again, of no fault of the Nigerian child. And by the way, if you put that Nigerian GS3 child in those systems, they probably would do better. Right? Because we're not bereft, we're not short of the human capacity.
Oh, so yes.
What we have is a systemic problem. You understand? So in as much as you say, okay, what will make the difference? What's the difference between, which is your question, what's the difference between the GS3 guy in Nigeria and those other places? It's an unfair question, right? But to answer it is the fact that those other guys probably have clarity very early on as to what their outcome is. So those guys in GS3 or its equivalent in those other countries, by GS3, they are clear as to, I want to become a doctor, right? I want to become an engineer. And the reason for that is because they already have all the data sets, all the information about what that outcome looks like vis-a-vis their natural inclination. Yes, you do have some cases. I remember growing up in our own secondary school back in the days, we had a system whereby you are made to sort of like choose your career path at GS3, but it was still very hazy, right? Because again, and I remember a very, very funny story. At that time, I wanted to be an astronaut.
Oh, wow.
But guess what? Nobody was offering anything like that.
Wow.
And I didn't know.
Oh.
I sincerely, innocently didn't know. So again, of course, what happened thereafter, I had to make do with what was available. Now, fast forward to now, most of the children that we have in that cadre right now may not have enough information to even determine their outcome. And for the most part, they're just trying to, pass the exams, right? So I think the biggest difference or the biggest disadvantage that the guys that we have in our own environment now versus those other climes is that they don't have enough information about the outcome, right? It's not the shortage of the human capacity. It's really about not having enough information about the kind of outcomes that they would be pursuing, right, as compared to those other places. So again, it's not a fair question, but I think just because of the system that the Nigerian child finds he or herself, right, within the Nigerian context. Of course, you have some Nigerian students who already are aspiring to probably even go and pursue something outside, which is another conversation. But the advantage that those guys have over us is basically the amount of information that they have available to them, and they have an amount of, and how much more robust their entire system is, which helps to facilitate their outcomes, right? Even from that stage that is not available to the Nigerian child, right? Mm-hmm. So that's the advantage. That's just the advantage and the difference, I would say.
That was really robust. I would have asked a question about intelligence, but then I think you've covered that answering this. So I would like to ask again, in terms of education, do you think that the system has put a thin line between being educated and passing exams?
Because there's this socio-economic situation confronting the Nigerian family. Because keep in mind that these children at that stage, they're not on their own.
Yeah.
There's the reality of the socio-economic reality that the first thing is to survive in most cases.
Sure.
And survival for that child means passing that exam. And that unfortunately becomes the priority. At that stage, particularly even sometimes up until your K-12 stage, the consideration is not about you wanting to become the best AI scientist. The consideration is pass JAB.
Pass your exams. Don't waste your parents' money.
And because, again, going back to the system has pushed forward passing exams over and above everything else. And this is one of the major challenges that Tuteria is trying to crack today. Last year, 78% of the children that wrote JAB failed JAB.
It was bloody.
That is an alarming number. And that tells you the state of emergency to just passing exams. It also tells you that our systems has not graduated beyond the point of passing exams. So to your question, what is important, what the system has made, or what the system has made a priority to the average Nigerian child is to scale those examination hurdles, right? As opposed to anything else. Not because they're not intelligent to think otherwise, but because the barrier of going to the next stage is simply it's very cumbersome. And unfortunately, because of how badly the academic system of education itself has evolved over time, what you are seeing in this failure rate is also a pointer to the poor academic outcomes. So not only are we dealing with these children passing exams, we are dealing with them being several steps backwards in their basic academic formation, which gives you, it's a mixed bag of challenges because you're now dealing with children who do not even understand basic science, foundational literacy, which really is one of the problems that Tuteria over the last 10 years we've tried to solve. And in fairness to us, we've been very successful at it.
Amazing.
And so the client call here is, if we're able to scale up academic excellence like it used to be, right, we will not have to struggle to pass JAB, right? And by extension, the primary goal of the Nigerian student will not be to pass exams. Rather, it will be to not just excel in those exams, but, begin to pursue more meaningful outcomes that will, on the long run, positively impact on themselves, their immediate community, and of course, society at large, nation. So again, there isn't a singular answer to the challenge. It goes all the way back to the decay that we've seen in our academic outcomes, right? Which is also a byproduct of the poor system, right? And we've talked about that system. I mean, the system over the years has decays, tools that could have enabled things more, infrastructure challenges, and all those things. So you have the combination of all these challenges posing a threat, which is the reason why today, for the Nigerian child, the next big milestone is to pass an exam, which in itself is not supposed to be the case, but this is where we are right now.
Thank you. This has been so productive. I have one more question, but then I like how you've centered a lot of this education system down to the outcome.
Yeah.
So it's a forward-thinking scenario, not just based on what you want to be when you grow up and limit it to that. My final question, Josh, is if Nigeria could fix 3 things in education in the next 5 years, what do you think it should be and why?
Number one on the list would be we need to find a way to improve our learning outcomes from an academic standpoint. Interestingly, that is not a standalone solution. That is also directly proportional to the quality of teachers, right? At Tuteria, we have about 12,000 teachers on our platforms, and one of the things that we consistently push is quality. And we're hoping, with the work that we're trying to do with civil society, with government, with private sector stakeholders and rest of them, that we can ramp up these numbers. Because again, the impact of a teacher for a student is so immense.
Important.
It is so important because that is the first line of interaction that a child has with anything academic. And what we see today is clearly the broken situation of the quality of teachers. And of course, the first fix is we need to improve the learning outcomes, which can only happen when we have more quality teachers. That'll be number one. Improve learning outcomes is not a standalone. You need quality teachers. And so focus for us, for Tuteria, for example, is quality. Number two, obviously, a holistic system redesign all the way to tertiary, right, I would say. Interestingly, our foundational education curriculum, right, yes, a few tweaks can be done here and there, but I would say where we now need to begin to really make the serious adjustment is from senior secondary upwards. I think a holistic revamp reflective of where we are in the world today. And again, this is not even limited to education alone. You understand? The other day I was listening to Elon Musk, and Elon Musk is saying medicine as a study, as a course, will become obsolete in the next couple of years. Why? Machines, what they call artificial super intelligence, ASI, would take the stage of modern day medicine. And what you have from that is that there will be more high precision diagnostic. There will be more high precision solutions. I mean, you begin to see people with outcomes of results of research, groundbreaking, solutions to things like cancer. We'll begin to see them. So the point there is that if we are now in an age that, even the entire notion of having, for those people that went to school to study medicine, I'm sure they feel offended by that, right? But in reality, we're coming into a world whereby a lot of disruption needs to happen to the way things are done, including within the education space. So I would say a holistic curriculum redesign from SS1 all the way to tertiary needs to start happening. Obviously, we've talked about it, outcomes. One of the things that we need to be very intentional about moving forward is skills acquisition. And, we like at Tuteria, we like what the Honorable Minister of Education is currently doing right now by instituting vocational education at scale through the TVET program. And really, we need to this needs to become mainstream, whereby, back in the days, we used to have technical schools, technical colleges. Those things need to come back, right? And they now need to come back with a fusion of technology. And this is what countries like China, this is what China has done. Going back to that, my story.
Yeah.
A senior secondary school's project, a university student's project is to build an EV. Yes, that's the project. Or build a machine of some sort. And because that is the standard in that environment, it engenders creativity, innovation, and invention. And so today in China, you have exhibitions whereby people are exhibiting all sorts of robotics. And that is because in that climb, they have infused skills with a layer of technology into their entire education system. So I think those are the three things that over the next 5 years that we need to do very quickly. And at Tuteria, we are currently offering interventions in all of this area, right, to support, and which is the reason why we're reaching out to partners to really scale this up, both at sub-national level and national level.
Awesome. I don't think any organization or system can survive without technology now. So particularly, I like your last point.
Yeah.
This has been really productive, and thank you, Josh, for coming to this
pleasure.
talk show. We'll do more of this, and we hope to see you in our next episode. Bye.